Hey everybody, this is Eric Lopez, also known as Blue Beetle and the Scarab, and you're listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files.
Recognized, Uncle Walker, D01. Recognized, Emily of Arden, D12.
Hello, team. Thanks for joining us for Episode 4 of Whelmed, the Young Justice Files, Season 2. Welcome to the cave. My name is Rich, and I'm here with my not-a-sidekick, Emily.
Hey, guys.
As some of you may have heard, Caleb actually went missing from the League Watchtower last week. We found him, and
it's worse than we thought.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. He needs a shave. If we're ever missing, and you'd like to try to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files, on Facebook at Crashing the Mode, on our website, crashingthemode.com, on the yjfiles.tumblr.com, and at our email address, whelmedpodcast@gmail.com. And with that housekeeping out of the way, let's dive in.
Dude, never even heard of an Apple-laxative before tonight.
You freshmen never do the homework. Haven't you read the case file on the League's first mission? Haven't you taken the guided tour of the hall?
Those are rhetorical questions, right?
Hello, Megan.
Title for this week's episode is Salvage. The release date was May 19th, just 1 week after the previous episode. We're chugging right along with Season 2 so far. The in-episode date is February 13th through 14th, so this is technically the Valentine's Day episode of Young Justice. The director was Tim DeVar, and the writer was Greg Wiseman.
We have special guest voice credits, same as we've been having regularly. Michael Trucco playing Adam Strange. Kevin Graveau is back as the mysterious partner. And we have Kevin Michael Richardson, who's done a ton of voices in the show, but in particular, I find it really cool that he does the voice of both Mal Duncan and Bruno Mannheim, who sound nothing alike. Super amazing voice talents. I had no idea Kevin Michael Richardson did the voice of Bruno. That's super cool. Yeah, and with that, let's dive into our mission. We've got some deep and meaningful conversation to have here.
Just in time for your next mission.
Absolutely. So in our pre-credit scene, we get a quick clip of Red Arrow stopping a thief as he exits a store. The store owner is grateful, offering Red Arrow a reward, but Roy declines it. Unfortunately, we see that he's also pocketed some of the money the thief stole. Green Arrow watches from a rooftop across from the action and notices it too.
Post-credit scene at Star Labs, Adam Strange and the Star Scientists activate the Zeta Shield given to them by Sardath. We also, 1, learn that it won't stop a starship or a boom tube, and 2, we finally hear the voice in Jaime's head. Connor grabs Jaime and heads out of the cave, claiming he is going out on personal business. Meanwhile, Green Arrow, Nightwing, Canary, Wally, and James Harper, aka Guardian, confront Roy on a rooftop, intervention style.
We cut to Superboy and Beetle in the Supercycle. Superboy has been keeping tabs on Intergang, the mob organization we saw in Season 1 receiving apocalyptic tech via boom tubes. He got a tip that Bruno Ugly Mannheim and Whisper Adair came out of hiding. Superboy and Beetle are following them when they realize the mobsters are headed to the Hall of Justice.
Back at the intervention, Canary gets more direct with her concern for Roy. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to put it. Meanwhile, Beetle opens up to Superboy about the fact that the scarab that's on his back that gives him his powers, the armor, etc., possesses an artificial intelligence that talks to him. When the two of them get to the hall, Bruno activates an apocalyptic piece of tech that animates the Apple-laxative husks we saw back in Alienated that are inside the hall. The husks meld together into a massive kaiju-like construct that takes down Beetle and Superboy and Wolf and Sphere. Well, Beetle takes them down, actually, when he attacks the golem with a sonic attack that the golem redirects back at them.
Back on the rooftop, Roy is confronted by the former Guardian, Jim Harper, who we now know is also a clone of the original Roy. Jim makes it clear that Cadmus' policy was to delete the source material, and that though they all spent years looking for the original Roy, they didn't find him because he is more than likely dead.
Back on the supercycle, after they've recovered, Superboy explains to Blue the history of the Apple-laxatives that we heard back in Alienated, including that the crystal husk can absorb and redirect sonic energy. The cycle then tracks Bruno and Whisper Adair into a nearby forest. The supercycle blocks the apocalyptic signal from Bruno's device, freeing the construct, which heads straight for a nuclear reactor. Watching from nearby is Sportsmaster and the Light's mysterious partner, who we still don't see because he's conveniently standing in the shadows. Curse him. Superboy, Wolf, Blue, and the Supercycle try to stop the construct from destroying the nuclear reactor, but can't physically stop it and need to find a new plan.
Back on the roof, we find out that the original Speedy was abducted before Wally and Dick met him, meaning that the only Speedy they knew was Red Arrow. We also find out that Wally retired from being a hero. In the end, Roy pushes his friends away, ignoring their advice and support, and heads home.
Blue communicates with the construct using sonics instead of an attack this time, and we find out that the creature is trying to cause the reactor to explode so that it can commit suicide. Before Superboy and Blue can offer to help it, the mysterious partner, destroys the creature using a weapon that looks disturbingly similar to those on Blue's armor. Superboy and Blue return to the clearing where they had left Bruno and Whisper behind. The two villains are in comas, apparently induced by Sportsmaster, to be used as quote-unquote living warnings for those who stray from the light.
We then cut to Wally returning home to his apartment, where we find out that he and Artemis are still together, sharing a little off-campus apartment, and are in a great relationship. In our final scene, Roy returns to his rundown apartment, where Cheshire is waiting for him. We then find out that Roy and Jade are married. His obsession with the original Roy pushed her away. They have a daughter Roy didn't know about. And finally, that Jade has called in all of her favors just to find the location of the original Roy Harper.
Yeah. All right. There's so much going on in that that one last few minutes of scene. I suspect you may have some Aster. So
yes.
Let's get on with that.
Superboy, are you alright?
I'm fine. Feeling the Aster.
Okay. So, starting at the top of the episode, Roy Harper, or as I described him, a scruffy disaster human, is making some very bad choices. But I love that the opening for this, when you know kind of the comics history, kind of works as a great aesthetic nod, if not a nod to the actual storyline.
Interesting.
That Roy was a drug addict in the comics.
That
they kind of portray him.
Yes. I'm sorry. That made me so happy and disturbed at the same time. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. They literally stage an intervention for him after he's desperately trying to get money to do something he's obsessed with.
Wow,
So,
you're cracking this wide open for
overall-
me, Emily. This is awesome. For some reason, this just never occurred to me. This is so... For those of you who listen to our Crispin Freeman episode, where he's talking about asking Greg if he gets to be a drug addict, this is what he's referring to, what Emily's nodding to. It was the fact that in the 70s, they had this story arc where Speedy was actually a drug addict. I can't believe this parallel. Go ahead, keep going.
That's probably about as far as I can stretch that parallel, but I just thought it was quite interesting that they're like, we can't do this storyline because we are technically a kids show, but we can nod to this storyline.
Yes.
If we stage an intervention.
Stage a...
So I thought that was great.
Absolutely. I loved the fact that we got to see Superboy really full on, like, mature in comparison with another character in the show. We knew that he'd kind of grown up, but the fact that he even refers to Blue as a freshman, they never do the homework. He's doing all this detective work. He's tracking down Bruno. Like, he's just doing all this really good, cool stuff. And Blue's just blowing him off. That was probably one of my favorite parts of the episode. And then, except for all the things you keep pointing out about this episode, I didn't realize. Like, that thing with the construct.
I will talk about that. I just wanted to say I also love that Superboy calls him a freshman because it acknowledges that there's kind of a hierarchy in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
That everybody from the original team is just kind of a little bit above. They're the seniors, they've got cred, and then there's Blue who doesn't know what he's doing.
And I like that they finally revealed that this episode that, what's going on with Blue's Beetle. I knew enough about him to know that was what was going on, but only because I'd watched Brave and the Bold and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
I had no idea, and him revealing it just drove me to be like, why didn't you tell the team sooner? You've been around for a little while. Connor reacts pretty calmly. Why wouldn't you just tell everyone before this?
I mean, that's a really good question. I think I remember asking myself that question too, but I didn't know much about how this history was in Young Justice at the time. But now that we have the whole season, I don't know. They thought that the construct. You know what? Actually, that's a little Crashing the Mode. We're gonna have to talk about that in Crashing the Mode. Let's catch that there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, do we want to jump into the thing?
Yeah, you just need to go do the thing. Just get this off your chest.
I'll just do the thing. I'll just do the thing. So, there is a line in this episode. There is a line in this episode where when Blue Beetle translates what the Apple-laxative golem is saying, I'm just going to read the quote because I have no other way to just summarize this. He says, "It's communicating its pain. Listen, where is the stillness of wood, of stone, of crystal, of metal? All this noise, all this life is pain. We sense the power in this place, power enough to destroy us, to end the pain, to be still again." To which Connor responds with, very quietly, "I can relate." And quickly follows it up with, "I mean, we can help you. We will help you." So I could be reading too far into this, and everyone is entitled to tell me I'm wrong and overanalyzing, but to me, this conversation really reads as Connor acknowledging that at some point, either during the 5-year skip, that he was suicidal at some point during that 5 years. And that's pretty dark for a kid's show, but at the same time, it feels so natural and feels so real for everything we've found out about everything he had to go through and everything he found out about who he was and all the repercussions of that. I can very obviously believe that Connor would feel that way.
I agree, and I don't think it's a deep dive at all. I don't think it's you reading too much into it. I mean, he pretty clearly says, "I can relate," and then tries to backpedal.
Yes. Yeah. And the fact that both he and the golem would be kind of impossible to destroy. We've seen all of the things Superboy can go through, and to have him in that situation of wanting to not exist and wanting to die and knowing that there is no way for that to happen would be just kind of heartbreaking and awful for him. So just that connection between him and the golem and all of that is so interesting and so well done. And I like that it's not approached at all as this is a very special episode where we're going to be dealing with something. It's just, this is part of who Connor is and part of everything he's gone through.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So here's a question I have for you. Do you think that, because when you revealed that to me, you blew my mind because I had not caught that. But here's a question. Do you think this contemplation was during the 5 years that he was with McGann? Or do you think this contemplation was after he had to break up with her because of what she did?
That thing that she did that we can't talk about because Crashing the Mode.
Yes, but yes. Because he said in the last episode, he said in episode 2, he said, "She made me break up with her."
Yes.
Right?
Yes. But with that, I feel like it's such a short timeline that I can't see him being, because it's only one reference in this season to this aspect of Connor's character, and we know from all of the other things that their breakup was very early before season 2. I don't think he would be at this point where he'd be calm enough that this would be something he could even say just that casually and then backpedal on it. To me, I always, when thinking about it and trying to place this, for me, I always thought it was when he found out he couldn't age. When he found out that he was going to be 16 forever, that he was never going to change, seeing everybody else change around him and being stuck what he was.
Yeah.
And all of that combined with the knowing Lex Luthor is his dad and everything else, I don't think the breakup helped.
Yeah.
But I always thought it was probably earlier than that, but that's just me speculating
Interesting.
because we don't know.
Yeah.
But
Let's revisit this in Crashing the Mode, because I have some things I want to say, but I think you're right. Let's crash that mode then.
Okay.
Let me see. Before we dive into the last 3 minutes of this episode, which I think is all you.
Yeah. All my other notes are the last 3 minutes.
Yeah, this intervention on the rooftop, like when Connor leaves the cave, grabs Beetle and leaves the cave, he asks Mal, where's Nightwing? And Mal says he's taking a night off, a personal business or whatever. And then we see what the personal business is. And it's, the original Red Arrow's two best friends next to Calder on the rooftop. James Harper, the former Guardian, who is literally related to him. And then basically his adopted mom and dad, kind of. We don't know anything about this Roy's parents. We're assuming they're dead. But, Black Canary is just as much involved in his life as Ollie would be. So having them all on the roof like this, I don't know, it was really cool that it wasn't like, okay, we found Roy, let's call the Justice League in. You know what I mean? Right? This is a point you had made. Like,
Absolutely.
you could have brought in everyone,
Yeah.
But they didn't. And I like the fact that they made it a real personal thing. It puts a whole different spin on this whole interaction now with your drug intervention thing.
And I love Dinah being there and everything. And it makes sense that she's there, but I also love that she's there because we know she is the team's literal therapist all the time. So of course she would be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just love that.
I don't know if she's, like, in the comics, I don't remember her being a therapist in the comics. She was literally a florist at one point. But we don't know anything about her personal life here. Like, she may just be, that's just who she is as a person and is there to talk to people. But I think it would be super cool if she actually was a therapist. But I don't know if we know enough about.
I'm not sure if this is crashing the mode, but there is a scene later in the series of her, like, in an office being a therapist to the team, like, not in the cave or anything.
Right.
So.
It's true, I guess.
Maybe.
I don't know.
But.
All right. Yeah. Let's dive in here. I'm going to let you off the leash.
Do you want to talk about Ted Cord before I...
That's actually probably a good idea. Yeah, let's do that. Yeah. So we do get to find out about Ted Cord, and as some of you may have heard in the Jeff Stormer episode, we talked about Ted Cord a little bit. And there's a long history of the character of Blue Beetle that actually reaches back into the 30s and 40s with a radio drama. The original Ted Cord from back then was an archaeologist, or the original Blue Beetle, I think he was an archaeologist, and he had uncovered this scaraby thing that gave him some kind of powers, and I can't even remember what. It wasn't much of anything. It was like, he was just kind of a detective-y archaeologist guy. I have to go back and re-listen to my radio dramas with him in it. And then he was reinvented. He was actually owned by a different comic company than DC, and then DC bought a bunch of different comic companies that included the character of Captain Atom and Shazam and that kind of thing, and incorporated them into the DC universe. But Ted Cord was kind of a Batman-y character, a little bit combination of like Batman and Spidey, I guess. He had lots of gadgets. He had this floating bug that he flew around in, and martial artist and that kind of stuff. But he was also a little bit more on the lighthearted front. But he was a good character. He was a pretty cool character. And then in the comics, he was actually killed by a character named Maxwell Lord. And then Wonder Woman killed Max Lord, broke his neck, actually, for killing Ted Cord. And that was recorded, video recorded, and like sent all over the world. So everybody saw Wonder Woman being a murderer. Well, supposedly a murderer. So, as Jeff mentioned in our interview, Ted Cord's death is used as a springboard to do some other storylines with other characters, including the creation of Jaime. So, Ted Cord as a character, in here we get to see him as a hologram in the grotto later and some things like that. It's not much crashing the mode there. But, theoretically, Ted Cord had created this beetle device. And we find out later that he was killed as a background thing that pushes into some of the plot, the upcoming plot that we'll do in either Crashing the Mode or another episode. Well, that's it, really. I really like Ted Cord as a character. I kind of like the fact that he's at least in here and they didn't just drop Blue Beetle in here with no other connection to the DC history. And that's it, really. Ted Cord. He's awesome. Now I've made her wait long enough.
Yes.
You're off the
My
leash.
time has come.
It's time for smoochies.
Yes.
Talk
Yes,
about the
it
smoochies.
is. As we said, it is literally only 3 minutes of the show, and half of my notes when I was originally watching it are on these last 3 minutes of 2 scenes. As we all know, because we watched the episode or heard the debrief, Wally and Artemis go to Stanford University in California, and they live together in their own little off-campus apartment, and it's adorable, and I love it. I love it so much. They get to be happy. They get to be so happy. And that scene is so well done, because at first you think Wally's returning to his own little apartment alone, and then she walks in. But watching it again and paying attention to all the details, I love the set dressing for their apartment. I'm one of those people who loves to look at like all the props in a scene just to see what someone decided to do with it. And with animation, you have to be even more specific with that. Nothing happens by accident.
Right.
So I love that it all makes it feel really real and lived in. Their walls are covered in posters. There's one of Artemis's bows is hung on the wall in the background. If you look closely, there's like papers all over the floor, and there's books stacked up. And there's a sink full of dirty dishes. And they have a dog who, fun fact, because fun facts are fun, is named Bruce Lee and is named after and modeled after Artemis's voice actress, her dog, Stephanie Lemlin's dog. And so I just think that's fun and adorable that they got a dog together. And yay, they're just so happy. And Artemis is finally back, because you go through those first 4 episodes and you're like, okay, where are Wally, Artemis, and Calder? Okay, Calder's back. Where are Wally and Artemis? Okay, Wally's back. Where's Artemis? There's Artemis.
Yeah.
Yay, she's here.
But also, like, we finally get Roy back too. His life is a shambles. We get Calder back. He's looking like a mess, right? And you're just like, what is happening to everyone? Can we please have a break?
5 years and everyone's life fell apart except Wally and Artemis, which is sweet, because in the first season, they're like always fighting and always at each other's throats. And now they're just happy little domestic college couple.
Yeah.
It's so cute. All the little details in that scene make me so happy.
And being together 5 years is, it's not nothing. So 16 to 21 for Wally anyway. Yeah.
And then all of that adorable, fluffy domestic cuteness is juxtaposed with the next scene in Roy's just disaster of an apartment that's just falling apart. And I love that. I kind of love how they juxtaposed that, of just this happy domestic scene between these two, followed immediately by Roy Harper is alone and sad, and then he's not alone, and then things are complicated.
Super complicated.
Yes, because Cheshire shows up, and I don't know if I've gotten a chance to say how much I love Cheshire before, but I love her. And with this scene between them, with this final scene of how we wrap up the episode, among all of the many bombs that are dropped in this one scene, I love that there's like this level of familiarity between them when they're talking to each other. When we saw their relationship in season 1 and like the little bit of their relationship that we saw, it was very much about like pushing each other's buttons and testing what they could and couldn't say to each other and what did and didn't work when interacting with each other. But now they've known each other for 5 years, and they tease each other and they still snap at each other, but they're so comfortable with each other. Like Cheshire shows up and Roy immediately relaxes once he realizes that it's her. Like, who's there, draws his bow and is about to like kill her, and then she walks out and she's like, it's me, calm down. He's like, oh, it's just you, and sits back down. And I love that there's like no hesitation between them anymore. They're still flirty and sassy and all of that, but they're married and they know each other. And it's just such a well-written scene that it's still recognizable as what they were in season 1, but with 5 years of evolution added on to it.
Yeah. You and Neil both mentioned about a lot of this, or at least some of the stuff that happened between Cheshire and Roy was recorded in the video game, right? Neil didn't mention it during the interview about the video game, unfortunately, but we talked about it a little bit afterwards. Do I have to play the video game for that? Did somebody collect that somewhere? That, like the video clips?
People have,
oh, awesome.
actually. because that part of Young Justice Legacy wasn't in the game exactly. It's kind of weird to explain. It's not in the actual main storyline, and it's not in the actual main storyline, and it's only told through these little collectibles that you can pick up throughout the game randomly, that you'll stumble across these little icons that are like pages, and you can pick those up, and they form what's known as the Red Arrow journals in the game. And then you get to read the 5 years from Roy's perspective from, I don't know, I feel like it's like 15 maybe journal entries that people have so nicely gone through and retyped and put on the internet, so that you can read about how Roy and Cheshire kind of got together, because we don't get a lot in the show with them, and we don't even get a lot from the Red Arrow journals, but you kind of see how over the course of 5 years they went from enemies to a little more than enemies to actually dating to married to Cheshire leaving. So that's just really interesting to see how that takes place from Roy's perspective, at least.
Well, find a link for one of those, and we'll put that in the show notes for sure. I need to read that because I haven't caught up on any of that. Yeah, those last few minutes were like so satisfying, and so many bombs dropped, like you said. Like, that was crazy town, and I loved every minute of it. And we knew that the original Roy was still alive, but I'm like, how are they going to end up, if they've been looking at it for him for 5 years, what is going to be that thing that allows them to find him? And this, to me, made some good sense.
Cheshire, who goes to places that the good guys don't.
Right, and you can understand she's not going to turn in all of her chips, until it was absolutely needed, to do. So, yeah, I like it. All right, let's wrap up that, and let's get into our Canary debrief here.
Stick around. Class is in session.
So I've talked a lot about inspiring your readers and watchers to ask the right questions. The thing is that you got to answer those questions too. So we get a lot of answers in this episode to previous questions, like, for example, where is Roy? Where is Wally? Where is Artemis? What is happening with all of these other characters? Who is this partner? And who might that person be? But each of those answers provides us even more questions. They give us satisfaction in that now I can let go of that stress. Okay, Wally's alive. He's not a villain. Artemis is not, I don't know, whatever. Roy might be an addict of something. But we get those answers, and then we get to actually ask some more good questions. That's how you hand off and move your plots forward. It keeps your readers engaged in your story. The problem is, as creators, it's a balancing act between giving enough appropriate information in the right context, withholding information. If you withhold too much information from the reader or watcher, that's a problem. Or worse, you're withholding information from the reader and giving really bad excuses for it. So, like, the thing that happens all the time, particularly I notice in young adult fiction, which drives me nuts, someone has all the answers, your uncle, your mentor, your whatever has all the answers, but they're just not telling you because it's inconvenient for the author, right? They're basically saying, like, oh, we don't have time for that, just run, or that kind of thing. Drives me insane. You're laughing, Emily. Why? Why are you laughing?
Because I'm the young adult girl who reads a lot of young adult fiction and picks up on these things and gets frustrated with these things a lot.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, I was working on a lot of prose stuff, and I, wrote a young adult novel and was studying that for quite a few years. And it was something that I picked up on all the time. It drove me nuts. Gosh, what was it? There's a young adult series where the main character jumps from like dimension to dimension. And it was pretty cool, but the opening part where he finds out about these doors to different dimensions and the keys and stuff from his uncle, they're running away from something to one of these doors, and he asks him a really straightforward question that should have been very simply answered, and the uncle's like, we don't have time for that now. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. That is not okay. You need to, as a writer, you need to not do that. You need to figure out answers to those questions and be okay with it and see where it takes you and move the plot forward, right? If you're going to withhold information from the reader, such as whether or not a character is a traitor, for example, you make sure to take the time to examine each scene with that character in it from every other character's perspective. You make sure everyone is acting appropriately on the information that they've been given or that you've decided that they have. And if they aren't, it's likely because you, as the creator, don't want them to act in a particular way. And your readers and watchers will pick up on that. You know, the idea I say of like your plot needs the characters to go left, but the characters as characters would want to go right. If you force them left, your readers are not going to trust you as a writer anymore, and they're not going to trust the characters. It's going to feel forced. So make sure everyone is acting appropriately on that information. The readers will lose that trust in the characters at least. Worse, though, they'll lose their trust in you as a creator. But if you take the time and care to make sure that everyone is acting at their full intellectual capacity, everyone is acting appropriately to the information you've given them, and you can walk that line back and forth until you give the big reveal as to whether they are a traitor or not a traitor or whatever it happens to be, you will impress, and people will want to take that ride with you again for another book, another comic, another TV show. So that's my Canary Debrief. Now let's crash this mode.
Tell us something we don't know yet.
Sorry, BB. We can't risk altering the time stream. We do that, we're all feeling the mode.
Okay, so what do we want to start with here? Okay, I have the one little thing that I picked up on in this episode, is that Leon's name is Leon Wynn Harper, and of course anyone who's read the comics knows that that is, in the comics universe, the actual name of Roy and Jade's daughter, but in the Young Justice world, it also happens to be Artemis's middle name, and the only reason I'm including this in Crashing the Mode is because we don't find that out until much later in the season when we see it on Artemis's gravestone, and that makes that little moment even more heartbreaking because you're like, oh, she's dead, and that's her gravestone, and that's the name of her niece. Okay, I'll just be over here crying more. It's fine.
Nice.
So I liked that little tie-in of being like, why is she named Leon? She's named Leon because it's Artemis.
Because of Artemis. I love it. Actually, I didn't actually recognize any of that either. So I love it. Nice. Look at you. You're blowing my mind. I like that they put James Harper back in, so we get that kind of full roundabout. Like they gave hints that that Guardian was a clone. He says that he's Roy's uncle in the first season and that kind of thing. But all of that, you wouldn't even think about that again until you rewatch through the first season again, maybe. But I like the fact that they put him up here for a couple of reasons. One, we get this confirmation that yes, he is a clone. He's not actually the original Roy's uncle. But two, they actually make way for what happened in the comics, which was that the original Guardian gave up his identity and was taken over by Mal Duncan, which we see later in this season. So this was a great tie-in a good tie-in justification for Guardian to give up his identity so that Mal can eventually take up the mantle. I really like that a lot. I love how Wally and Artemis retired. You and I were talking about this before we started recording.
Yeah.
We don't know how long they've been retired, but in the video game they were still in costume, and that was 10 months before season 2. So they couldn't have been retired. Yeah. So they couldn't have been retired for that long.
Which raises other interesting questions because, they're going to college in California and the team is on the East Coast. So that's just one thing to think about. But
Oh, yeah, I guess that's right, because they're in Rhode Island. Well, I guess that's true, yeah. It makes me... they were both in high school, while the original show was going on, so I guess they could still have been in college and adventuring. they didn't need to retire and then go to school. But yeah, sorry, I'm just thinking out loud now.
We're trying to figure out this complex timeline. Dear God.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Yeah. When I first saw them together, for some reason, my impression was that they had been retired for years. And I think maybe because they were in college together.
When the show was first going on, I assumed that they had retired when they went to college. That they gave up. They graduated, they gave up being superheroes, went to the other side of the country. But then the video game and everything makes it seem like they've only been retired for not too long. They could have retired after Tula's death for the same reason that other people left.
Actually, that's probably a good motivation too. I bet the YJ Wiki or somebody out there's got, somebody's probably asked Greg that question at some point in time.
Someone tell us.
Yeah.
When this goes up, someone tell us.
And there's a lot of Blue Beetle stuff. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh, a lot of Blue Beetle stuff. So I was talking about Ted Cord earlier, and I realized I was going to start crashing the mode because Jaime, until later on in the season, Jaime believes that Ted Cord created this beetle, that this was his greatest invention, this artificial intelligence that he was going to use and that kind of thing. But that isn't what it happened at all. That Ted had somehow found this beetle and was studying it, or, which I think they talk about in the comics, actually. Is that what they... Yeah, in the comics they talk about this, that the original Ted Cord, or not the original Ted Cord, the original Blue Beetle, this is the artifact he found. And he used it, but I don't think it was fused to his spine somehow. Or maybe he used it and it manifested itself differently than it did on Jaime. And then the new Blue Beetle, Ted Cord, didn't want anything to do with this thing fusing to his spine, so he just did what he was doing with his inventions. I'm going to have to go reread that now. And then Jaime, of course, got it accidentally when the light blew up Ted Cord's research lab at Cord Industries. So, and then this Black Beetle thing, right? So all we see is this arm, and he's got a weapon that's clearly exactly like Blue's. It was so confusing to me because like I said, didn't know anything about Beetle's background. I was like, oh my God, there's another one out there, but he's a villain. And I didn't know all the alien tie-in stuff. All I knew that there was this beetle and it attached to his back and it had an artificial intelligence, and that's all I knew. So that was a little shocking to me. And unnerving. I knew where all these characters came from for the most part. This one was eluding me.
As we all know, I knew nothing about Blue Beetle going into this. So I'm like, what is happening? Who are you? What is going on? Who are you? Who is that guy? What is that shadow? What are you doing?
What shenanigans are you up to?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, but there's not a lot else that really crashes modes for the future. They're still kind of setting up this 5-year jump establishment of characters.
Where everybody was. Where are they now? We need to know so we can move forward.
Right. And I think we start hitting in the next couple of episodes, we start cracking it open to the actual bigger picture invasion aspect of it. So there we go. Well, I think we can consider that mode as crashed as it's going to get. And then let's move on to some fan service. I actually have some fan service this week, which is the Gameable podcast, Gameable Saturday Morning Podcast. It is at Gameable Podcast. And basically, it's our Canary Debriefs turned to 11. So these are 1.5 to sometimes 2 hour long multi-part episodes where Chris and Katrina do deep dives into what originally started as Disney movies. They were the Gameable Disney podcast. And then once they got through all of the Disney movies, which is mind-blowing to me, they then started diving into Saturday morning cartoons throughout the decades, different animated series, different other animated movies. And they do this deep dive and they pull ideas out of them for story arcs, for characters, character development, that kind of thing, specifically for use in role-playing games. But they're a completely system agnostic podcast, meaning they're not talking about how do you use this in a Dungeons and Dragons game or a Rifts game or or a Masks game. they're just talking basically about storytelling breakdowns and storytelling beats and characters and supporting cast characters that you can use. So even if you're not a gamer, this podcast is fantastic for, creative storytelling things that you are doing. And I don't think it will have aired by this point when this airs, but Chris has actually joined us. I actually recorded with him this morning. And we go into a bit of a deep dive about Young Justice, but a lot of other shows and how you can use the shows that you love as inspirations for your creative efforts. Well, anything that you want to add there, Emily?
No, because I haven't listened to this one yet.
It's pretty good. The one that I got introduced to was the Batman the Animated Series one, which was great, and talks a lot about some of my absolute favorite episodes, and even talks about a few of the weaker episodes and what you can learn from them as well, which is good. But currently, as we're recording this, they're doing an entire month on Gargoyles. So if you love Greg Weisman and you love Young Justice, which is likely true if you're listening to us, go check them out. By the time this airs, like I said, their whole month will be done. So you'll have, I don't even know how many hours of Gargoyles deep dives that they're going to do. And it's been fantastic so far. Well, with that, I think we can wrap this mission up and head out of the cave. The best way to support our show, as you may have heard, is with a 5-star review on iTunes or your podcatcher of choice.
And please continue to hashtag keep binging YJ and hashtag buy YJ comics on Comixology. You can also now use hashtag Young Justice Outsiders when talking about Season 3. And if you want to help us get more episodes, more Secret Origins, actual play podcasts, and more, please consider supporting us through Patreon. For just a few dollars a month, you can help us do even more with the show while getting some great rewards for yourself. And remember,
stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our hosts are Rich Howard and Emily Booza. Our editor and producer is Neil Powell. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.